Top Democrats outlining the investigations their party could pursue if they win the House back in November. Congressman Jerry Nadler, who would chair the Judiciary Committee if the Democrats win the majority, says they would continue to investigate Russian meddling. Watch.
I think the Mueller investigation has to continue first and foremost, and the committee has to defend the Mueller investigation against the president's and the Republicans in Congress attempts to sabotage it, to discredit it, and to discredit the FBI and the Department of Justice. The role of Congress is not to protect the president, it's to hold the president and any president accountable to the American people, and we ought to be holding investigations.
Meantime, Republicans are reportedly preparing their own list of investigations that they think Democrats would launch if they flip the House. Axios obtained this document, dubbing it the Hell List. We're back with our power panel, Guy Benson and Jessica Tarlov. We can see some of the list there going up and down across the screen. Thanks for coming back, guys. President Trump's tax returns, the Trump family businesses, payments to Stephanie Clifford, a.k.a. Stormy Daniels, James Comey's firing. Really a long list of potential possibilities should the Democrats win in the fall. Do you think any of that will come to pass, Jessica?
If the Democrats win in the fall, yes, I think they will. They've made a number of requests to the various committees that they're already on, which have not been answered. So they're saying we've been asking these questions and we want to go further. But we just showed a clip of Jerry Nadler talking about something very specific there. But there's a lot more beyond the orbit of Russian meddling or, porn star payoffs. There are things about ethics compliance. There's, classified information being passed around Mar-a-Lago with no one seemingly in sight, who the president actually is playing golf with all the time and what he's talking to them about. The Trump family and the Trump organization benefiting financially and certainly in terms of power from, various dignitaries that are staying at their hotels and eating in their restaurants. Did they properly divest? There are lots of questions.
Guy, do you think those questions, if the Democrats do choose to, if they do win, if they do choose to ask them, if they start digging into all of some of the things that really happened long before the president was running or became president, could that really bog things down for the Democrats? Would that be a winning strategy?
Well, I think that one of the fault lines of this electoral campaign is going to be if the Democrats win the House in particular with that subpoena power, what would they do? And I think that Jessica's right. There would be a slew of investigations into all sorts of things, some serious, some frivolous. And there was a poll that NBC and the Wall Street Journal put out just this weekend that showed that Americans are, surprised, evenly split between concern that the Republican Congress would not hold the president accountable and concern that the Democratic Congress, hypothetically, would be overly obstructionist and do nothing but attack the president. And so I think you're going to see those arguments made by both political parties, with the Democrats, like Jerry Nadler, saying these Republicans are going to let him get away with anything. They won't hold him accountable. They won't investigate him. And the Republicans saying the Democrats won't be interested in governing. They'll be interested in constantly poking and prodding and trying to take down the president.
So we see both parties kind of saying, look, we have to win because we don't want the other guys investigating this. Does that strategy work as we head towards the midterms? We hear the Republicans talking a lot about this great economy. Is that a more winning strategy?
I would certainly think anytime that you can talk about the bread and butter issues, the economy, and now we have health care tied with the economy as the number one issue, you're going to do better. I don't think it behooves either party to make investigations their main touchstone. So that's on the Republican side. Obviously, you should be talking about the economy. That's the only area right now that the president has positive approval ratings on. Democrats can talk about the whole gambit. But if you just make it about Russia, or you make it about they're going to impeach him, that doesn't get people to the polls. It's not as exciting as, hey, maybe there's another tax cut in store for you, or I'm actually going to fix your health care, or, secure the border. So I think that this is being inflated into the main message of the Democratic Party, which as a Democrat, I can tell you it is not.
Although I think there is a sense that the Democrats would be much more eager to impeach the president if they had a majority. They're saying, let's not talk about it yet, but if we win, then that's another story. That is a motivating factor for Republican voters.
We just talked about that on the couch. And I think that's, if you want to get people to the polls for a midterm election, you tell them they're going to lose,
casually mention high crimes and misdemeanors, and then say, but let's not talk about that right now.
No, Adam Schiff obviously played that properly. I do believe, and I don't have any people that I talk to that are in favor of impeachment without actually knowing what you are doing it for. So when you have people
60 Democrats voted for it, so
I think a lot of those are show votes. 60 Democrats is also not even even close to the general population of Democrats.
I mean, impeachment, that's a little bit about the politics, but here's something. The ranking member of the House Oversight Government Committee, Elijah Cummings, sent a letter to Trey Gowdy urging him to bring up Cohen to testify. So that kind of takes things in a different direction towards the president's former business dealings, campaign for these finance allegations that Cohen has pled guilty to. Is that a bigger concern than political implications like an impeachment? Okay.
We don't know. We don't know what Cohen has, if he's telling the truth. They've already backed off some of the stuff that Lanny Davis went out there and sort of tantalized people that he might have knowledge about Russia. And then he said, actually, I didn't know what I was talking about. Never mind. So my position on this, and has been consistent, let Robert Mueller do his work. Yeah. He's talking to Michael Cohen right now. And I think for Democrats to try to jump on that bandwagon, that almost might be stepping on the toes of Robert Mueller, which is not, at least theoretically, what they would want to do.
Or SDNY is who's going to move ahead with their investigation, no matter what.
Guy Benson, Jessica Tarlov, thanks for joining us.
Molly.
Appreciate it. We have the president here. Actually, we can take a quick look. This is President Trump welcoming the president of Kenya. Just moments ago, there at the White House, at the White House. This is Kenyan President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. That is also his wife, Margaret Kenyatta. They're at the South Portico. We're just taking a look here. The critical country as far as, in particular, when it comes to terrorism. They have quite a battle there against al-Shabaab down there. Just some of the things that we're working with with our African colleagues. And we'll be right back.